So this is what it all started with. I've got a cell over here that is using the rich library, which technically is a library that you're supposed to use from the command line. It does very pretty terminal things for Python. One of the main abstractions that it gives you is this console object, which is basically this object where you can keep printing and putting stuff into. Given the right settings though, in particular, if you use this record equal true setting, and if you set the file to be equal to a string IO object, then you can also just keep on printing, and then you're also able to export it, which is happening down below over here. I basically have a object that allows me to pretend to be a terminal whenever I export to SVG, and SVGs can be rendered inside of a notebook, so I kind of had a cute little cell going over here that let me print stuff as if it were a terminal. And this is also where you can kind of start doing some fun stuff with Rich. So with Rich, you can do things like, hey, let's have this one character be blue. That's something that you can easily declare. And you now have a nice little blue input prompt over here. So there's actually a lot of stuff that you can represent using this terminal as an output. So okay, that's a cool trick. You can add color, but there's way more. There's also these objects that you could go ahead and use, like this syntax object. The whole point with that syntax object is that you get syntax highlighting. So you can point to a Python file. In this case, I'm pointing it to the notebook where I'm running this in. And you can see I get a nice little render full syntax highlighting of the Python file in question, which is this notebook. So again, okay, I now start thinking about what might be a cool Python object that I can make that has this as its representation. And again, that's because in Marimo, you can do this trick where let's make a class. The class is called demo. You can initialize it with a thing, and then thing becomes a property. But you can now add this one display method with an underscore. And now if I were to initialize this demo and give it some string, then the representation of this particular thing is now quite fancy. You get a nice little terminal. Normally in Python, you would kind of get something that's a little bit more boring, like this string over here. And that comes from the era where everything was running in the terminal, but we now have browsers at our disposal, so why on earth wouldn't you try and do something fancy? So far so good. I am able to display a terminal, but what might be a good demo? Like what would be something that'll be actually kind of useful to do with a setup like this? Well, long story short, I figured, hey, wouldn't it be kind of nice if I could just have terminal commands maybe run here? Maybe the ls command is something that can go in, and then on top I see the command that I've typed, and then below I just see the output. Now, for good measure, a thing you could do is you could say, well, let's also add a width parameter over here such that whenever I render some sort of a table that's very wide, that is then also something that we can go ahead and show here. So this is kind of useful just as is. You get pretty commands listed like this. But in Marimo, there's a special thing you can do with this now. And that is that you can chain cells together now that depend on things you want to run from the terminal. So just as an example here, right? I've got this command that's going to echo something, and then the thing that I'm echoing is going to go into this demo.csv file. That whole command is stored in this create variable over here. Then I'm running another command after that where I'm just displaying the CSV file that I made with the command above it. So you can see, little CSV file. That's what I've created over here. But I also made this variable. Now, the thing about Marimo is that if you ever have a cell that has a variable that it didn't define inside of it, like over here, right? I've got this create variable. Well, whenever create itself updates, then this cell below is also going to update. And just as a demo, let's just add the value 6 here. There we go. I scroll down below and I can see that this data frame automatically updated. This is super exciting because before you could only really get this with Python and Python variables. But if now, for whatever reason, you just have to run this one bash command and you want the cells to still update in a reactive fashion, well then the terminal is not going to be a blocker anymore and you get a nice visual output at the same time. So that suddenly turns this from, oh, a bit of a toy into, oh, I can actually use that and I didn't expect it. And it's not just that, there's actually this other thing I found out by accident. Notice what happens if I hit space now. Then you're going to see an autocompletion appear. It's not necessarily a great autocompletion, right? But you're going to see that it wants to maybe show me the less command, or I can just sort of toggle through. It's going to grep something, maybe do head, right? But the thing that's also just so funny about this is that I have the coding assistant turned on in Marimo right now. And because I have something that looks like a terminal command, I actually get autocompletion, which I didn't have before in the terminal. But I kind of get that for free now because the LLM will just look at this and go, oh, that looks like you're running a terminal command. Here's some autocompletions that might make sense. So not only do you get the chaining thing, you also get this auto-completion thing that you didn't have before. So again, this is just a short video, hopefully to inspire you, but the main point I want to get at here is that I like to think that this more visual way of going about with your code can also be a great source of inspiration, in the sense that it's way more playful, and that increases the odds of stumbling upon something useful. And I don't know, maybe that's something more people should do. Take recreative programming seriously. If this is something you're interested in, by the way, from Moterm is what I call this thing, you can now import KMD, and you can now also mix and match some things you want to run in the terminal with your Python code and get pretty output. It's a small project, but I hope you like it.